Hi everyone, so in the next 1 or 2 weeks we should get the final patch notes for season 23, and I have played on a lot on the PTR. I've tried all the new stuff and given a lot of feedback in different videos, and here I want to consolidate all of that into one place. I don't expect to really see a lot of sweeping changes anymore. I assume we're mostly going to see numbers adjustments, and with that in mind I will also give my suggestions for what the patch should look like and maybe the last minute things that Blizzard should take a look at. I don't want to talk much about the followers. I think that the follower system is going to get expanded anyway in the future, so there will be more Emanate items, there will be specific items made for Emanate system, I imagine. There will be all kinds of things, and there really has to be as well. So we need buffs for solo players. This is a good first step, but it's just that. We need much more in the following patches, and I'm quite excited to see where this will go in the future. There needs to be something for a bounty farm, for example, so kind of maybe a set like canes that you can wear to get maybe double bounty materials or something like that when you're in solo. So these kind of things definitely need to happen. For now we have this follower update. I think this is overall fine, and with the expectation that there's going to be more, I think it's going to be great. Alright, let's jump into it. First of all, Necromancer. So Bones of Rathma has been heavily nerfed since the last PTR patch, and that definitely has to be brought up again in many different ways. So first of all, Army of the Dead is completely gutted. Bone Spirit is kind of okay right now, but it relies on permanent invincibility with Land of the Dead, Invigoration plus Captain Crimson. So that has to be fixed in my opinion. It's been a long-standing feature of the Necromancer class to become invincible from this interaction, and it has never changed. And so far this was not really such a big deal because none of those builds were ever like the top performing build. But now you're gonna have Bone Spirit, and it's gonna be the top performing build on the Rathma leaderboard, and that is gonna be kind of an issue. So while the playstyle is very unique and very different from everything else, I think that should be changed. Permanent invincibility has traditionally been removed from the game whenever it occurred, and here we are, so that should be changed. The problem is that the Bone Spirit build afterwards will feel pretty bad to play, and actually, so when you want to push Bone Spirit, you have to go with Frozen Lands then, and that is kind of clunky because sometimes there's Juggernauts, sometimes there's some enemies that come and jump at you anyway, or it's just not really feeling so great. Right now with this Invigoration, at least the squishiness of the build doesn't matter so much, and the build is very squishy, so I think there needs to be some more toughness, for example in the 4-piece bonus, that can be improved to maybe 80% or even 85%, or maybe force people to use another toughness item, because this is pretty much the only defensive mechanic you have. You don't even have bone armor in that setup, so you basically have no damage reduction from anything besides this 4-piece bonus, and that makes the build overall very squishy. For solo speed farm, I think this is overall fine, so Bone Spirit works. It could need a small buff to be viable for groups, to be like on the same level as Bone Spirit in solo maybe. Right now I would estimate that the current version of Bone Spirit is maybe like 140-ish or so on the high end. Bone Spear is probably 145, so definitely a few more tiers, kind of like room for buffs. And with the permanent invincibility removed, toughness needs to be upped a little bit. You're gonna lose your squirts a lot more, you have to make pulls differently, so you're probably gonna lose something like 4 to 5 tiers compared to now. So this means that definitely can be a huge buff here of the Bone Spirit. So for example, the Burns of Selena could be buffed. Right now they give 400% increased damage for Bone Spirit, and I think this would be pretty cool if the build actually wouldn't have any Land of the Dead at all, and the 2-piece bonus from Rathma would also reduce the Bone Spirit cooldown. Like this, you can have one more skill slot, which could be, for example, Bone Armor for toughness, or maybe something like Simulacrum for a little bit of extra DPS, or to go with the set, actually Army of the Dead. So you could have the Army of the Dead and Bone Spirit combo, and then you could also change this effect here, that gives you 2% increased damage for 10 seconds each time Army of the Dead hits an enemy. Right now this is an extremely weak bonus, and it doesn't make Army of the Dead worth whatsoever. The big problem here is that this disappears on the first hit. So you just get like, let's say 50 stacks or maybe 100 stacks depending on the pull size when you use Army of the Dead. And yeah, that is quite nice. Let's say 100 stacks gives you 200% damage, but this one is additive with this value. So in the end, this is something like a 40% damage increase, maybe 50%, Maybe you can even double the damage if you cast 2 armies of dead or have like a really large pull, but only for 1 bone spirit. So this is extremely bad, and I think this should be kind of like a rolling buff that, you know, maybe stacks up to, let's say, 200%, so let's say 100 stacks, maybe 200 stacks, and it kind of allows you to continuously have the buff active whenever you cast Bone Spirit, and then you have to make sure the buff doesn't drop by just casting Army to Dead all the time, and you can use that as a supporting like AoE damage skill or just as a grouping skill with Death Valley, and that could be pretty amazing. So you completely ignore Lambs to Dead entirely, and you use Armies to Dead to keep yourself safe by grouping up enemies, and then you get area damage value and you just blast stuff down. That could be very fun. Could be a very nice build in solo speed farming and also for solo pushing. Kind of just don't get hit build where you control enemies and you shoot from far away. I think that would be amazing. Even so, the build is probably going to be weaker than Bone Spear anyway, and not really the best with Gun Killer still. So can definitely up maybe the 6-piece bonus or something, and maybe buff it by another between like 3 to 5 tiers after doing these other changes that I suggested. That would be pretty cool. Now, Army of the Dead is probably the more beloved playstyle even, and has been completely gutted in the last patch. So there was a lot of hype for it, and now it's dead in the gutter. So after removing the Army of the Dead from the Bonds of Selena, the build just lost so much damage on top of the other changes like Rathma's Shield and also this, that it's just not fun anymore. It's just not good. It needs a lot of buffs. So first of all, I would increase this cooldown reduction value here. So 0.25 makes it so that you can essentially just cast it once every convention cycle. You can't even spawn Oculus Rings for yourself. This is how bad this is, even when you try. So I think the cooldown reduction needs to be upped to at least 0.5 here to make it kind of smooth, to allow you 2 casts every convention cycle, maybe even 3 casts if you try hard. It would make it much smoother for D16 farming. Right now it's extremely clunky to even farm D16 with this. So this is kind of the bare minimum. And also I would say this 400% damage increase from Bonds of Selena needs to come back on the bracers. And then you could have this one item used for both the Bone Spirit and Army of the Dead playstyles, and it would be pretty decent. So Rathma's Shield nerf is still heavy for this because no squirts, because, well, you're squishy, you need toughness somehow, but it would not be terrible anymore. You could probably reach somewhere in like the 140 or so with those 2 changes that I just suggested. And again, kind of like the same level as Bone Spirit with those changes I suggested, but still, you know, kind of like middle ground, I guess, for like the Necromancer builds. So again, some room for improvements, for example on the 4-piece bonus with more toughness, for example on the 6-piece bonus with more damage, but this is kind of like the minimum that I'd say. Also, Rathma's Shield itself can definitely be changed again. So right now I don't see why this needs to have a 60-second cooldown. This is way over the top. I believe something like a 15-second cooldown might be okay, 20 seconds perhaps, or something like that, to give you a little bit of invulnerability sometimes. The thing is, there's also a lot of collateral damage here for other Necromancer builds. So there's, for example, the Auto Lancer or the Support Necro, these kind of things that suffer heavily from this for no reason whatsoever. And I believe a much shorter cooldown would definitely be appropriate here. Just don't have it be near permanent invincible. Just, 20% uptime on something like that is not too bad, I guess, if you compare this to other invincibility mechanics like Smokescreen or Serenity or these things. This is about it for what I would say for those 2 builds from Rathma. I think that overall Necro is in a very good spot for next season. I would actually suggest a Rats nerf. I think we are likely that with a heavy Firebird nerf we're gonna run Rats again, and everyone is very sick of Rats. So it might be time to change that. So there are some ways to do this, for example, bug fixes. So the Simulacrums, when you have Horned Visions equipped, are not supposed to cast your mages, but they do, so that can be fixed. That would immediately drop Rats by probably somewhere between like 2 to 3 tiers. And also the Reqiuem Cereplate chest gives you pretty much infinite resources when you have Devouring Aura, and that could also be changed so that you have a little bit more trouble keeping up your mages all the time. And that will probably drop down Rats by another 1 to 2 tiers. And if you combine those 2, then we'd look at the nerf of between 3 and 5 tiers for Rats. And I think that would be pretty appropriate as well to bring it in line with other XP metas and also leave more design space for other XP metas. Because right now it's going to be Rats most likely with a Firebird nerf. So there is the God XP meta, but that one is also quite a bit behind by probably 20+% XP or so. So most people are not going to play God TH, even with the changes that probably made it slightly better for speedrunning, but the God speeds are simply too slow compared to Rat runs, and just can't really keep up even though they're running the same tier. And speaking of Firebirds, let's talk about the set changes here. So they buffed it heavily like last time in the PTR. I believe that this is definitely too strong and it can be toned down a little bit. I think the best change for that is to just revert the 2-piece bonus here. So it went from 3000% weapon damage per second to 7500, and that also multiplies all the other damage that this build does. And if you revert this, it's going to be a drop of around 6 tiers, and that would still leave Firebirds at pretty much the top of everything. So we would still have the Firebirds XP meta at around the same level or slightly above Rats, and we would have probably the strongest solo build in the game with Firebirds, and that would really keep up the hype, I believe. I don't think it should really be nerfed more than that. Maybe some other small adjustments, for example to Deathwish. So that would be cool if Deathwish was removed from the build, or just in general, I don't mind. So no one really likes Deathwish. Right now the best builds on Firebirds actually use a channeling playstyle with mirror images, and while I really like that mirror images are seeing some use right now, and suddenly, surprisingly, they are good, I believe that this shouldn't really be the Firebirds playstyle. So I think the Flameblade stuff, for example, is really cool. The Meteor Shower stuff is really cool. I don't really want to stand there and channel this integrate, and I don't think this was the intent of the developers. So doing something about either mirror images or about the Deathwish itself, maybe just have Deathwish not apply to Firebird damage, or have Deathwish just be a lower multiplier. There's a variety of options here, and Deathwish is not really used in many other builds anyway right now. So it's pretty much just here. So there's not really much of a downside or a collateral damage to nerfing Deathwish to begin with. Otherwise, I'm really happy with the Firebirds. So Firebirds is very fun. I'm looking forward to playing it a lot. I just hope that this doesn't get obliterated. So as I said, 2-piece bonus can be changed. I mean, theoretically, also any of the other bonuses can be changed to a lower value. It doesn't really matter. It just changes from one part to another. So if they reduce the combustion stacks, or if they remove some of the multiplier here, any of that is fine. But basically just one of them should be reduced, and that's about it. So for the Demon Hunter, we have these changes. The 6-piece bonus got buffed on the God set to 15,000% instead of 10,000, but the arrow piercing got capped to 3, which was previously infinite. And this means that for high-end pushing, a quite heavy nerf, because missile dampening is gone, because your damage in large density is much lower. God will cap out somewhere at around 140, maybe slightly lower, and it's going to be very hard to kind of like reach the same levels or close to the same levels as before. But it also has the upside that fishing is reduced heavily, so there's no more missile dampeners, there's it's just much more consistent damage. You're not gonna run stricken anymore, so you can kill pretty much all the bosses really quickly, and it's just overall an improvement, I would say, for most people. Farming efficiency is actually gonna go up, so most people will probably experience better results for farming with God set for the 16, for solo speeds especially. God is gonna rule everything after the Firebird at least. And it's going to be very strong and a very good build to play. In my opinion, the Pierce cap could be changed from 3 to 4 perhaps, to kind of lift it up a bit more. Right now we're actually in serious danger of having God fall behind rapid fire, and no one wants rapid fire to be the Demon Hunter meta. We've had that for many seasons. Everyone hated it. Please don't have rapid fire as the strongest build on Demon Hunter. So there's a good chance Natalia rapid fire is going to take the crown. And after that, there's also AotD rapid fire, which is kind of close to God DH. And if they up the pierces here to maybe 4 even, would probably mean something like a 2-tier buff. We could beat rapid fire, or at least be on the same level, and then you can kind of decide which of those builds to play. I think we don't need much of a bigger buff to this, because, well, God DH has a purpose, which is the best XP build in the game pretty much, besides Firebirds. and there is still a lot of value in playing this. So it doesn't need to be like the super crazy high-end push build in the game, and it's still going to be one of the top Demon Hunter builds, but a small buff here would definitely be in order, I believe. And lastly, the Spirit Barrage. I haven't really talked much about this during the PDR, but I believe that Witch Doctor players are quite upset about this, and quite understandably so. I have explained that the nerf is actually kind of justified, because if you compare Bone Spear and Spirit Barrage, right now in Season 22 they are quite close, and Bone Spear loses around 8 tiers from Marina Shadowhook, and Spirit Barrage loses around only 2 tiers from Boost Juicer in 4-man. So we're talking about the 4-man overall performance, and Spirit Barrage is first and foremost a 4-man centered build, I'd say, because of the insane density scaling and this low mobility that it has and all these kinds of things. So Spirit Barrage will just blow everything away next patch without the nerf. So that is actually making sense. I think that's slightly too much nerfed. So right now, in case you're not aware of what happened, the Gazing Demise stacks up to 3 times, and after the patch it will not stack anymore. So you drop from 450% damage bonus to 150% damage bonus, leaving a total with 250 instead of 550, and that is a nerf of around 5 tiers, which is also quite heavy, but basically puts it in line with Bone Spear after the patch. However, since Spirit Barrage was actually not used at all this patch, and everyone was playing Bone Spear because it was overkilling everything so heavily, I believe this nerf could be slightly reduced to maybe make it 200% or something on the Gazing Demise, to give it like another bump, like a tier or something, to help out the build. Because also right now, I think especially in the lower end, it's going to be quite difficult to do very efficient speedruns with the Witch Doctor. So a little bit of an improvement here would definitely help. Perhaps to help out solo players, it could also give an even bigger increase to Manitou damage. So maybe you have this 150% bonus, and then you have double the bonus to Manitou, on top of all this attack rates from Manitou and all this kind of stuff, just to bump that a little bit more, and to have faster boss fights, to rely much less on really big pulls, because this is one of the big issues that Witch Doctor has in solo pushing. It is extremely fishy, extremely density dependent, and shifting even more damage would definitely help out here to improve the overall build, I'd say. Spirit Barrage is going to be the winner anyway on Witch Doctor, but if you compare this to other classes, I understand that Witch Doctor feels kind of weak, and this is definitely one of the reasons, and now it got nerfed again. So yeah, that could be at least reduced a little bit. The nerf is justified, but the problem is that other top tier builds haven't been nerfed, for example Heaven's Fury or Bone Spear and all these things. And while they lose more from the 4th cube slot, they are still way above Witch Doctor right now. And if there's no nerfs to those builds, then we can also have a bit more mercy on the Witch Doctor here. And that concludes it for this video. So I try to give my input here and explain a little bit of why I chose certain numbers, for example, and I hope that my message got through. So overall, my intention is to just keep stuff a little bit more in line with each other, have like more fun by having a better balanced endgame meta, especially for the Necro with the new sets and also the Firebird. I do believe it's not such a bad idea to have like the new flashy stuff be a little bit better than other stuff, or kind of at least at the top level. Right now Firebirds is way too strong, Rathma is way too weak with both Bone Spirit and Armor of the Dead, so we need some heavy buffs there, and quite a heavy nerf to Firebirds. But even heavy nerf to Firebirds that at least maybe cuts the damage in half or maybe to 1/3 would still leave it quite good and not really super crazy anymore. I think that these bird runs are going to be very exciting. A lot of people are going to have fun trying them out. So I'm definitely hyped for Wizard especially, but also try out any kind of possibly buffed Rathma setups. And then we can look forward to a pretty cool season here, even without a seasonal theme that will most likely return in Season 24. So here's my input. Hope you enjoyed my thoughts. Let me know what you think. Maybe you have other suggestions for how to change certain things, or maybe there's something I missed. Let me know what you have. Keep in mind, I specifically try to not make too sweeping changes, not introduce any new mechanics or items or something like that. I specifically just looked at numbers mostly, And obviously there is a lot more potential to improve stuff, to improve builds, make them more fun, but nothing that would be in the scope of, you know, the last final patch that we're gonna see. I could probably go on for another hour to talk about every single set and what I would do and how many things I would add, but obviously this is not happening. So this is just kind of disclaimer here. So hope you liked my video. See you guys next time.